I'll be talking to or also sharing with us the concept around business idea testing. Uh, the road from conceptualizing an idea to actually converting it to a business has so many risks and so many uncertainties. And one of the best ways to reduce that risk of pursuing your ideas to help you save time and energy, just save you time and energy so that you're not pumping so much money, so much time on a very large scale to a business idea that might not succeed is by testing that business idea. And a lot of times I hear people ask, what's business testing? What does that even mean? How does that work? Wouldn't it take time? Wouldn't it take money? Wouldn't it take so much energy? And the answer to that is a no. Because the point of actually testing your idea is that you're not pumping in so much money, you're not pumping in so much energy, you're not wasting resources, you know, down the line. And so it would not make sense to actually do the same thing while testing. And so what you're doing as in business testing is that you're trying to gather as much data that tells you or that kind of gives you an insight into if that idea would actually make it in the market, or if it's going to be feasible, if it's going to be desirable, or if it's going to be viable when it's converted into a business or when it becomes a business. And sometimes people also ask, so what's the value of testing your business in the first place? My question to you would be why do you want to waste money? Why do you want to pump in so much energy, waste so much time on an idea that may not make it in the market when you can tell that from the beginning and either decide to move on or just continue the business. And that is why I think the concept of business idea testing is something that we need to learn as new entrepreneurs, as existing old entrepreneurs, whatever we are, as long as we are having ideas and um, you're trying to execute on ideas generally. And in this video, I'm just going to run you briefly through how business idea testing really works. I would say that to test your idea, it involves about 4 steps, right? The first is to define your hypothesis. The second is to design and execute your experiment. The third is to analyze and synthesize your findings. And the fourth is to take actions, right? And a disclaimer here is that this video is already assuming that you have an idea and that you have your business model sort of, figured out or mapped out, right? And for mapping out your business model, I like to make use of the business model canvas from the strategizer team. I think it's one of the simplest tools that you can get out there to kind of figure out, what your idea is, how the people who you are creating or who you will be serving, or what problem you're trying to solve, who you're serving it for, what you need to serve, what you need to deliver on that idea, how you would reach your customers, and so many other things. How much you charge, how you make money, what your cost structure looks like. Right? I think the business model canvas is a very, very simple tool to capture that. And so, before you start to test your idea, you want to make sure that you have mapped out your business model in some sort of way or in any way that really works for you. Now, I'm going back. I will take each of the steps that I've listed earlier and then I'll go through it one after the other. So the first one I said is to identify your hypothesis. And what's a hypothesis? In a very, very simple term, I would say that an hypothesis is like an educated guess. So let me give you an example, like a random example. So I have an idea to create a website where people can come and shop for products, and then I would it will be delivered to them, right? And so one of the assumptions I would make is that our users or my potential users like convenience. And so because of that, they would rather shop on a platform, from my platform, rather than maybe going to get the product themselves right. That's an assumption. Of course, you this assumption would be refined to make it a lot better before you experiment. But that's just an example of an hypothesis, an hypothesis or an assumption. And of course, one of the easiest way for you to generate all of these hypotheses is by going through your business model canvas, going through each block and just asking yourself, on this block, what has to be true for my idea to work out there. That is one of the simplest way to generate your hypothesis, especially if you're new to the idea of creating hypotheses or creating business or testing your business ideas generally. And it's very important that you capture your hypothesis first before you even start to do anything, because that is the hypothesis. Your hypothesis is the foundation of any other thing you would do. And to learn more about how to the importance of hypotheses and or how to create one, I have attached like a link to an article I wrote in the description section, so you can read the article and get a lot more information. I also added some resources that will be helpful for you to learn more about like crafting a good hypothesis. Right now that you have like a list of your hypotheses, of course you probably will come up with so many hypotheses. Like, I remember that I worked with a client and we had about almost 20 hypotheses, and because it was such a small team, of course we're not going to run experiments on 20 hypotheses. I mean, we would be so overwhelmed and exhausted. I don't think we would even be capturing, we would be able to manage the entire thing, right? And so I would always advise that if you're a small team, and by a small team, maybe just yourself and another analyst, maybe you want to prioritize your hypotheses. And what exactly does that involve? It's just basically looking at each hypothesis and trying to rank them in terms of importance, and also if you already have some sort of like proof to validate or invalidate this as well. And that entire process is also called assumption mapping. And within the article, you would also find more resources to learn more about what assumption mapping is and how it typically works, right? But if it's a bigger team and you have the capacity and the resources to run all of this, to run experiments on a lot of hypotheses, then congrats, that's great. I mean, why not carry on? But I would always advise that you prioritize your hypotheses so that you can test the most important ones first, before you even think of going to some other ones as well. Now that you have a list of your hypotheses, the second thing you want to do is to design and execute your experiment. So remember, I said design and execute your experiment, because you actually need to design your experiment. You cannot just jump into like, oh, I'm running an experiment now and I start to just implement things. No. And I know that what people wonder what's an experiment. And a lot of people hear experiment, they're like, oh, A/B testing. Of course, yeah. A/B test isn't a type of experiment, but there are like a lot and lot of tools or a lot of methods to experiment your ideas, And what's an experiment? So an experiment is how you actually test that. Oh, how you actually test your hypothesis, how you actually test that, oh, this hypothesis I have generated is actually true or it is false. You understand? And so there are so many experiments or methods to test your hypothesis. You have things as simple as a discovery survey, you have something as simple as an interview, you know. So you could use prototyping, storyboarding, um, so many A/B testing that we all know, which is really the popular one. There's so many like tools you can use, right? And in my articles as well, I've attached like articles or more where you can read up on more tools within to use for your business testing as well. So yeah, once you have a list of the experiments you want to run, um, you will need to start to define a lot of things. Now, some things to consider when trying to choose your method, right? It's always advisable that for each hypothesis, you want to have more than like multiple experiments being run on one hypothesis. And I know you wonder that isn't that a whole lot? Not necessarily, right? I would say that if you are a beginner, you want to start. If you pick hypothesis number one, for example, you want to um, almost like sequence your um, experiments in a way that you're starting from, say, simple methods to simple to execute methods to medium to execute method and hard methods. So let me give you an example, right? For my hypothesis one, I've identified that, I want to run some of the experiments I want to run would be a discovery survey, a customer interview, and um, maybe put up a landing page, or a prototype, share with a customer, or just put up a landing page with a call to action and actually send out emails to people to carry action and see what they do, observe what they do, right? Uh, I would say that you start with the easiest, which is a discovery survey, right? Then next is a customer interview. And the good thing is that all of these experiments can even run side by side, right? So as you throw out or send out a survey, you can also like start to conduct interviews to at the same time. Do you understand? And then before you then move to something as maybe something a little more difficult to implement, like maybe pulling up a very simple, scrappy website and asking people to join a wait list or to pay for something, right? That's the way I would advise you to sequence that so that it's not overwhelming for you. Another thing to consider when choosing your method is the say do gap, right? And the say do gap is what happens when people say they will do something, but it doesn't exactly translate to what they will do, right? So I could tell you that, on my way to work, I will get you a cup of coffee, right? And anything could happen. I could miss my train. I could get into a bad mood, or anything could just happen that would prevent me from actually getting the coffee, or maybe I would probably just forget. And so, what I've said I would do doesn't exactly translate to what I have done, right? And it happens a lot when it comes to this, like just discovering things from our users, right? And so you want to use a mix of method that allows you to identify what they say and also to a large extent gives you um almost like almost replicate or gives you an idea into what they would do. So for example, a survey would tell you what they would do, right? A customer interview would give you a deeper understanding into, or maybe a deeper dive into what they would actually do and why they may do it, right? But putting up a website, for example, and saying, join the wait list or pay for something actually gives you an insight, like, into what they would actually do. Do you understand? So the first two gives you insight into what they say they will do. The last one gives you insight into what they would actually do. So it's always nice to have like a mix of method that gives you both data so that you are able to evaluate things and make better decisions. Right. And so once you have all of those experiments listed out, it's now time to design. By designing, I mean, if you have your surveys, you want to create your survey and send it out to people. If you have your interviews, if you choose interviews, you want to create your scripts and also, share the invite people for your interviews, right? And so once you have that sorted out, you start to gather different like data. I would advise that I mean that you document all your findings, as detailed as possible. Now the third step would be to start to analyze and synthesize your learnings, right? And as you gather your data, I also advise that you also start to identify patterns, start to analyze and synthesize. Of course, as you're getting more data, you're going back to the drawing board to also figure out if anything has changed. But I think that the earlier you start to analyze, the faster or easier it is for you, especially if you're a newbie. It gets overwhelming if you have lots of data points to start to evaluate. And I think that, so for example, as each experiment ends, you are analyzing and synthesizing your learnings there. As different experiment ends, you just analyze and synthesize your learnings there. Sometimes you even find out that some insights from or some learnings from an experiment also serves as an input the next um, into the next experiment. So it's always important to actually analyze and synthesize your learnings after each experiment that you run. Now, the last stage is now to take actions, right? You have all your data, you've gone through your learnings, you've analyzed it, you've gone crunched all your data, everything, responses that have been given to you. Now it's time to take actions, right? And actions could be in different ways. So if your data points you in the direction that, oh, people love your product, they will buy it, they will pay for it, why not move on to higher fidelity designs, right? Start to implement that your idea. But if the data is a bit inconclusive, you might want to run more experiments just to gather much more data. Much data that gives you better insights, right? But if your data is saying that it seems like you have overestimated how people might want your product, you might want to maybe not just kill the idea, but maybe there are different ways to go about it. You could either like tweak your value proposition a bit, or change the value proposition completely, the problem you're trying to solve, change it completely, or change the markets completely, people you're designing for, look for another set of people and try to like build something else for them, or just pretty much you can change the product, you can change the market, you can also change the problem you're trying to solve as well. There are different ways to approach it. Approach um it when your data is not in support or has invalidated your hypothesis, right? And you see that at the end of the day, experimentation itself or business testing your idea itself doesn't guarantee you success. Um, but what it does for you is that it reduces the risk and uncertainty involved in actually implementing a business idea. Just to recap what I've said, the first one is to identify your hypothesis. Second is to design and execute your experiments. The third one is to analyze and synthesize your learnings, and the last one is to take actions. And I have attached about 2 links in the description box here. One to an article I wrote that will give you more details on how to go about this, and I also give an example of how I tested um, an idea with a particular client of mine. The second is a link to a guide, that would also help you when you are running your own experiment. And please feel free to ask me any questions in the comment section. I hope that you have learned a whole lot and that this convinces you to start to test your ideas. So happy testing, everyone, and see you in the next video. Bye.